Welcome to Democracy Now!, democracynow.org. This is Breaking with Convention, War, Peace, and the Presidency. I'm Amy Goodman. Baltimore City Attorney Marilyn Mosby has announced she will drop all charges against the remaining 3 police officers charged in the death of Freddie Gray. Gray died in April of 2015 of spinal injuries after he was arrested and transported in a police van. This is Mosby.
Without real substantive reforms to the current criminal justice system, we could try this case 100 times and cases just like it, and we would still end up with the same result. Accordingly, I have decided not to proceed on the cases against Officer Garrett, Sergeant Alicia White, or to relitigate the case against William Porter. As a mother, the decision not to proceed on these trials, on the remaining trials, is agonizing. However, as a chief prosecutor elected by the citizens of Baltimore, I must consider the dismal likelihood of conviction at this point.
That's Maryland State's Attorney Marilyn Mosby. Gray's death set off nationwide protests, but many activists had already lost faith any officers would be convicted. This is Baltimore activist Kwame Rose on Democracy Now! After the acquittal of Lieutenant Brian Rice, the highest-ranking officer to face trial.
Well, you know, my thoughts on the verdict, it's completely evident at this point that Marilyn Mosby charged these 6 officers only to stop protests and what powers that be in Baltimore City feared was unrest that would continue to happen if they did not charge. So this was a crowd control. That's what this measure was.
Kwame Rose was convicted and fined on charges related to protests last year in favor of charging the officers. In a New York Times column Wednesday, New York Times columnist Charles Blow responded to the news that all charges against officers have been dropped by writing, quote, "I am now incandescent with rage. I am at the screaming place," he wrote. We'll have more from Baltimore later in the broadcast. Here in Philadelphia, the Democratic National Convention has entered its final day. Last night at the Wells Fargo Center, President Obama called on Americans to support Hillary Clinton.
Tonight, I ask you to do for Hillary Clinton what you did for me. I ask you to carry her the same way you carried me, because you're who I was talking about 12 years ago when I talked about hope. It's been you who fueled my dogged faith in our future, even when the odds were great, even when the road is long. Hope in the face of difficulty, hope in the face of uncertainty, the audacity of hope.
As President Obama spoke, hundreds of people held signs protesting the TPP. Some protesters also unfurled a banner reading, quote, "TPP kills America." This is California Delegate Alex White.
In October, when the full text released and it was made known to the public that there was a death sentence clause in it that would basically mean that pharmaceutical companies would have a 20-year monopoly on medications that would cause a single medication to cost anywhere between $50,000 to $100,000 a year. My wife was diagnosed with a rare form of lung cancer 3 years ago, and through our I have to do it for her and everybody who's diagnosed with cancer. I mean, that's why I don't want to mean any disrespect to President Obama, but I gotta stand up for people who are diagnosed with cancer. When they're fighting for their lives, they shouldn't have to fight to afford their medications.
That's California Delegate Alex White. On Tuesday, Virginia Governor Terry McAuliffe, who's close to Hillary Clinton, told Politico he believed Clinton would change her position and support the TPP if she's elected. Meanwhile, Wednesday night also featured a primetime speech by Clinton's running mate, Virginia Senator Tim Kaine, who spoke about the historic nature of their ticket.
My fellow Democrats, this week, we start the next chapter in our great and proud story. Thomas declared all men were equal, and Abigail remembered the women. Woodrow brokered the peace, and Eleanor broke down the barriers. Jack told us what to ask, and Lyndon answered the call. Martin had a dream, and Cesar y Dolores said, "Si se puede," and Harvey gave his life. Bill built a bridge into the 21st century, and Barack gave us hope, and now Hillary is ready.
During his speech, Senator Kaine also spoke about the 9 months he spent with Jesuit missionaries in Honduras in 1980, saying, quote, "I got a firsthand look at a different system, a dictatorship," he said. But what Kaine failed to mention, as Professor Greg Grandin notes, is the U.S.'s involvement in the installation of that dictatorship, then backing it with millions in military funding. We'll have more on Senator Kaine with Greg Grandin on Friday on Democracy Now! On Wednesday, delegates also disrupted former CIA Director and Defense Secretary Leon Panetta's speech by chanting, "No more war."
Today,
the arena eventually turned off the lights on the Oregon delegation, where many of the chants were coming from. But delegates shone the lights of their cell phones and continued chanting. Meanwhile, on the Republican side, Donald Trump called on Russia to hack Hillary Clinton's email.
Russia, if you're listening, I hope you're able to find the 30,000 emails that are missing. I think you will probably be rewarded mightily by our press.
Come as U.S. intelligence agencies continue to blame Russia for the hack of the 20,000 leaked DNC emails. Speaking at the DNC Wednesday, retired Navy Rear Admiral John Hudson said Trump's call to hack Clinton's email was criminal intent. Meanwhile, Donald Trump also doubled down on his calls to defend NATO allies only if they've spent enough of their GDP on defense. Speaking at a rally in Scranton, Pennsylvania, Trump said, quote, "We're protecting countries that most of the people in this room have never heard of, and we end up in World War III. Give me a break. They have to pay," Trump said. His position squarely contradicts that of his running mate, Indiana Governor Mike Pence, who told PBS NewsHour last week, quote, "We'll uphold our treaty obligations, including the mutual defense agreement that is NATO," Pence said. Former New York City Mayor Rudolph Giuliani, who is now a national security advisor to Donald Trump, has called for measures to force Muslims on the government's terrorism watch list to wear electronic tracking bracelets. During the same news conference Wednesday, Giuliani also boasted about how he sent undercover agents to infiltrate mosques as early as 1994. Fox News' Bill O'Reilly has doubled down on his comments that enslaved Africans who built the White House were, quote, well-fed. He made the comments on Tuesday in response to First Lady Michelle Obama's speech at the DNC Monday night.
I wake up every morning in a house that was built by slaves. And I watch my daughters, two beautiful, intelligent black young women, playing with their dogs on the White House lawn.
That was Michelle Obama speaking Monday night at the DNC. This was Bill O'Reilly's response.
Slaves that worked there were well-fed and had decent lodgings provided by the government, which stopped hiring slave labor in 1802. However, the feds did not forbid subcontractors from using slave labor. So Michelle Obama is essentially correct in citing slaves as builders of the White House, but there were others working as well.
Fox News' Bill O'Reilly comments sparked widespread outrage and were seen as a defense of slavery. But on Wednesday, O'Reilly claimed the statements were, quote, just a fact, unquote. Actually, primary sources contradict his claims. In a letter from November 28, 1800, First Lady Abigail Adams described enslaved Africans forced to labor on the White House's construction as being, quote, half-fed and destitute of clothing, unquote. Turkey's government has dismissed nearly 1,700 military personnel and closed more than 130 media outlets since a failed coup earlier this month. That number includes nearly half of all Turkish generals and admirals. Human rights groups have also reported widespread arrests and torture of suspected coup sympathizers. The Pentagon says it'll open a formal investigation into what Syrian monitors say is the U.S.'s deadliest attack on civilians since the U.S. began bombing Syria nearly 2 years ago. The strike took place 10 days ago near the city of Manbij. The monitoring group Air Wars said the strike killed between 120 and 150 civilians. Until earlier this year, the Pentagon claimed no civilians had been killed in its air campaign against ISIS, while at the same time claiming more than 20,000 ISIS fighters had been killed. In New York City, all charges have been dropped against Democracy Now!'s Tarina Nudura and Juan Carlos Davila. The two were arrested in April while filming a protest at an anti-Trump rally in Manhattan. The police grabbed their camera and microphone, slamming them to the ground as they shouted "press." They had been charged with disorderly conduct. And the first African-American author to win the Pulitzer Prize for fiction has died at the age of 72. James Allen McPherson was awarded the Pulitzer in 1978 for his book, Elbow Room. McPherson grew up attending segregated schools in Georgia. He graduated from Harvard Law School. He pursued fiction instead of law after winning a short story contest. He was professor emeritus at the Iowa Writers Workshop in Iowa at Iowa University at the time of his death. And those are some of the headlines. This is Breaking with Convention, War, Peace, and the Presidency. I'm Amy Goodman.